Community Center. Al-Mizan means the scale or the balance. This sisters-led Taleem series is facilitated by women, but is open to everyone and is not intended to be an all-female gathering. Our goal is to address challenges facing our community through the guidance of the Quran and Sunnah, while providing practical, everyday applications that help us strengthen our faith, character, families, and communities. Today, I'm honored to introduce our featured speaker, Dr. Halimah Al-Khattab. Dr. Halimah Al-Khattab, PhD, is a board-certified psychiatric nurse, practitioner, researcher, and community advocate who believes that healing must be culturally grounded and spiritually aware. She holds doctoral, master's, and bachelor's degrees in nursing science from Indiana University and provides mental health care across school-based, outpatient, inpatient, and telehealth settings. Halimah specializes in serving youth, families, trauma survivors, and refugees. She also offers therapy that honors cultural identity and faith. She is passionate about holistic healing and community transformation. And outside of work, loves photography, nature, great food, and spending time with her family. Join me in welcoming Dr. Halimah Al-Khattab.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for being here and making time for a conversation that I think touches every family in some way. Parenting and caregiving can bring deep joy, but it can also carry worry, exhaustion, guilt, and questions that we don't always feel comfortable asking about. Today's session is not about perfect parenting because perfect parenting doesn't exist. It's about responsive parenting, noticing what a child may be communicating, responding with mercy and wisdom, repairing when we get it wrong, and seeking help when a concern is larger than what a family should manage alone. Our theme today is connection before correction and safety before solutions. That doesn't remove rules, accountability, or Islamic guidance. It helps us deliver guidance in a way that protects the child's dignity, preserves the relationship, and keeps the door open for truth. So we begin with the idea of parenting as an amana. Children are an amana, they're a trust. They need guidance and protection, but they also need mercy and belonging. Our goal is not to raise children who never feel anger, sadness, anxiety, disappointment, or confusion. Emotional silence is not emotional health. A healthier goal is to raise children who can recognize what they feel, communicate honestly, accept limits, repair harm, and use safe coping skills and ask for help. A child who can approach a trusted adult with a difficult truth is safer than a child who has learned to hide struggle in order to avoid shame or punishment. Mercy doesn't mean permitting harmful behavior. Mercy can include a firm boundary, a consequence, teaching, an apology, a referral, or emergency response when needed. The question is not only, how do I stop this behavior? The question is also, what does this child need in order to become safer or more responsible and more resilient? That question leads us to a whole child view. A whole child approach recognizes that spiritual, emotional, and cognitive, physical, behavioral, relational, developmental, and environmental needs affect one another. Behavior is important, but behavior is not the entire story. A child who's irritable or refusing school might be anxious. A child who can't sit still may be sleep deprived or overwhelmed or struggling with ADHD. A child who suddenly becomes aggressive might be grieving, bullied, frightened, or exposed to conflict. A teenager who appears lazy might be depressed. Sometimes the behavior is ordinary development, and sometimes it's a signal that further support is needed. Whole child parenting asks, what is happening within this child and around this child? We still address the behavior, but we don't assume that every symptom is disrespect, weak faith, poor character, or deliberate defiance. The relational foundation for understanding the child is attachment. So, attachment means that over time, a child experiences the caregiver as a safe base. The child learns, I'm loved, I belong, I can come to you. Even when there is conflict, we can reconnect. The security between the caregiver and the child supports learning and honesty, exploration, responsibility, and most important, repair. Attachment is not permissiveness. It doesn't require that the caregiver has to constantly be available, but it's built through repeated small interactions, predictable routines, warmth, affection, eye contact, shared meals, play is very important, and listening. It also means returning after conflict to make the relationship safe again. Many of us were raised in homes where adults provided food, shelter, education, and discipline, but they didn't speak openly about feelings. We can honor what our families gave us while also adding emotional language and curiosity and repair for the next generation. Now, attachment becomes visible in the way we correct behavior. We're going to talk about emotional coaching and discipline. So when a child is highly dysregulated, they're really upset, they're throwing a tantrum, a long lecture does not usually work. Their brain is focused on threat, not learning. The first step that we want to do is begin by regulating ourselves. We want to lower our voice, slow our body movements, move close without intimidating, and name what you notice. For example, a parent might say, I see you're overwhelmed. Hitting is not safe. I'm going to help you calm down, and then we can talk about what happened. So in that instance, you notice that the feeling that the child is acknowledged. I see you're overwhelmed. The limit is clear, and accountability has not disappeared. It's not like the child isn't going to be accountable for hitting. But connection before correction doesn't mean connection instead of correction. It means that we lower the emotional temperature so the child can hear the limit, learn the missing skill, and participate in repair. Now, emotion coaching gives us a repeatable way to do this. So emotion coaching has 5 steps. I said 5 and then half a fourth there, sorry. Notice the emotion, name it without judgment, validate the experience, set the limit, and the one that's missing, help the child choose a safe response. So validation doesn't mean that every behavior is acceptable. It means that the emotion is real and understandable. So we might say, you're angry that the game ended. It's okay to feel angry. It's not okay to throw the tablet. Let us breathe and we'll decide what happens next. So over time, children can borrow our calm and our words. We're setting an example for them. A young child may need us to name the emotion for them. They may not know what's going on. They just know they have a feeling and they have big emotions, and so they have a big reaction. But if we can help them learn how to name the emotion, then they can start to do that for themselves. So a teenager might need more space and less talking when they're upset. The goal is not to control every emotion. It's to help the child move through the emotion without harming themselves or another person or the relationship. The words we use can either open or close the door. Useful phrases that we can use might include, tell me more. You cannot imagine how much just those 3 words will open up the door for so much more communication. Other phrases might be, I'm glad you told me. Your feelings are not too much for me. We will handle this together. And when safety is involved, I may need to get help to keep you safe. So phrases we want to try to avoid. Stop crying. You're being too sensitive. You don't have anything to be sad about. Or, what will people think? These statements can end the conversation, but they don't end the feelings that the child is having. They don't end the emotions. We won't respond perfectly every time. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. And that is part of the process. But repair is powerful. So we can also acknowledge when we get it wrong. So we can say, I reacted instead of listening. I'm sorry. I want to try again. An apology doesn't weaken your authority as a parent. It actually models responsibility and teaches the child how relationships heal. It also reinforces, that you are a safe place for them, even when, you might get it wrong, or you might make a mistake. Now, discipline can follow the same dignity-preserving approach. Effective discipline teaches. It's not about punishment. It includes clear expectations, predictable and proportionate consequences. So not reacting and making a consequence big because you feel your own big emotion. It's going to be predictable and proportionate to what the situation was. Discipline also helps to practice the missing skill. So if they were hitting, for example, and then you want to teach them what to do instead of hitting, like this is what's going to help them practice that skill. It's also going to teach them repair of the harm and preserve dignity and then reconnect afterwards. So a consequence should relate to the behavior and the child's developmental level. A child who damages something might be able to help repair or replace it. A teenager who misuses technology can participate in creating a new safety plan. And when possible, the consequence should teach what to do next time, not only communicate that the adult is angry. Harsh punishment might stop the behavior briefly, but it also increases fear, it increases secrecy, it increases aggression, and it increases shame. When we're disciplining, we want to try to avoid public humiliation or religious threats or withdrawal of love. I hear all the time how some people begin to hate the religion because it was used as a tool to threaten them when they were growing up. And so we don't want to use religion as a punishment. We want the child to understand that what you did was not acceptable. You still belong to this family, and we will address the harm and move forward together. Now, some behaviors require more than discipline because they might be symptoms of something else. So recognizing the signs of what the something else might be. So anxiety in children might appear as excessive worry or repeated reassurance seeking, perfectionism, avoidance, refusing to go to school. It might be things like stomach aches and headaches, sleep problems. They might have panic attacks or be very irritable. And sometimes it can lead to just them shutting down. It might look like stubbornness when the child is actually trying to escape fear. So support with anxiety can include predictable routines, coping skills, sometimes school accommodations when needed, and gradual practice facing the feared situations with appropriate guidance. We don't want avoidance to make the child's world smaller and smaller, but forcing a frightened child without preparation can also increase their distress. The key question is whether anxiety is interfering with sleep, if it's interfering with school or friendships, with family life, with worship, or just ordinary activities. When the fear is persistent or it's impairing, that's when you might want to seek some professional assistance. So depression can also be missed because it doesn't always look like sadness. So depression in children and adolescents might look like sadness, but it also might look like anger or numbness, withdrawal, loss of interest, changes in sleep or appetite, low energy, failing grades, hopelessness or severe self-criticism, or thoughts about death. A teenager may appear lazy or disrespectful or always in their room. You want to look for a change from the child's usual pattern and a loss of functioning. You don't want to respond only with discipline when depression may be present. I'm going to ask, I've noticed you're sleeping more, pulling away, not enjoying things. What's changed? How have you been feeling? Depression is treatable, and support might include therapy or family changes, again, school accommodations, spiritual support, and sometimes medication, but not always. Asking for clinical help is not a failure of parenting or of faith. I often hear parents ask, or they will say, like, there's nothing wrong with my child. You know, there's like this fear of either like being judged as having done something wrong to cause this, but it's not a failure of parenting. It's part of protecting the amana that we've been giving. We want to try and protect our children. If this is something they're struggling with, we want to address it. Now, neurodevelopmental differences also require understanding rather than blame. Now, ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it is something that affects regulation of attention, impulses, activity level, organization, time, and working memory. So all of the executive functioning skills. So they have trouble focusing. They might be more impulsive in their actions and kind of just act without thinking. Sometimes they can be really hyperactive and move around. Seems like they're just like bouncing off the walls, or like the Energizer bunny. They just keep going and going and going, you know. Children with ADHD often receive many more corrections than affirmations. So they're the kids who, when they go to school and, you know, they're in elementary school and they have like the color levels for behavior, green, yellow, orange, and red. They're the kids who every day they come home on orange and red, or red, you know, so they're constantly being told like, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, because something that they don't necessarily have control over. They're hyperactive, and so it's time to sit down, and they have trouble sitting still, so they're constantly getting in trouble. Or they're impulsive and, you know, might just get up and run around or something. But it's not something that's a disrespect kind of thing. It's they're hyperactive, and so, but these are things that they get in trouble for, and so that starts to have an effect on their self-esteem. And they're not hearing affirmations or being told, you know, the things that they're doing well. So over time, repeated messages such as, why are you like this? You never listen. What were you thinking? Why would you do that? You know, that can start to create shame and anxiety. So some helpful supports for children who have ADHD include visual routines. So it's not something they have to try to keep in their mind, but there may be like a list on the wall of like step 1, step 2, step 3, or, you know, getting ready for school in the morning, having something visually that they can look at to help keep track of what they're supposed to be doing. Short instructions, so not giving them, you know, a list of things that you want them to do. You know, go get your backpack, go upstairs, you know, take the folder out, then go brush your teeth, and then put your, you know, like you want to say, get your backpack, come upstairs and come back, and then we'll do the next thing. You know, so we break it up into small messages. Or short, small instructions. You want to allow for movement breaks. You can't expect them to just sit forever. As adults, we have trouble, you know, just like sitting for long periods of time. We need time to like get up and move around. You can use things like timers, and then having predictable consequences is also very helpful. So if every time they do something, what happens is it changes based on your mood, like that's not teaching them, you know, just give them that routine to know like what is expected. If you do A, then B is going to happen. You also need to work on skill building. Sometimes as parents or as adults, we kind of expect that like you're how old? You should already know how to do this. You should know better. But maybe nobody ever actually like taught them, step by step what to do. And so actually teaching skills that may not come naturally to them. And then collaborating with the school, because if they're attending school outside of home, they're there for a significant amount of time, and what's happening at school is also impacting them, and how they feel. Sometimes therapy can be useful. There are people who work specifically with students or children who have ADHD that can help with that. And then for some children, medication can also be a useful tool. Um, Now, the aim is not to excuse every behavior. Like ADHD doesn't become an excuse for anything that they do. Like there's still expectations for them to meet and still consequences. But providing structure, it really it's a powerful tool in being able to work with them. And treatments that allow the child to meet some reasonable expectations aren't too much, or breaking things up in ways that allow them to have success, so they know what it feels like to get things right, or to be told like that they're doing a good job. Now, autism also changes how behavior and communication may be understood. Autism might involve differences in communication or social interaction, sometimes sensory processing or flexibility, and then as well as focused interests. So a behavior that looks oppositional might communicate overload or confusion or pain or some unmet need. With children who have autism, some things that we can do is try to prepare them for transitions, because sometimes that can be a difficult time for them. Communicating clearly with them, or reducing sensory overload when possible. So if a child with autism is sensitive to loud sounds, then sometimes they will wear headphones to help reduce the sound so that it doesn't cause overstimulation. Or at school, we have some students who, like, when there's just too much activity going on, it can overload them. So they might transition from one class to the next a little bit earlier than other students, so that when all the class is dismissed, they don't have to be in the hallway with all of the commotion. You want to try to support their strengths, and kind of find ways to highlight that, so that they can, again, feel like they're contributing, that they're getting things right, that they're able to feel included. You really want to try and include them in your family life or in community life as much as possible. And you don't want to interpret every social difference as disrespect or as a lack of intelligence, or a lack of interest. You don't want to require that the child hides every autistic trait as the price of belonging. Like, you can only participate if you look people in the eye. Sometimes that's a sensitivity or something that can be difficult for some children with autism. So you don't want to have to make them try to change who they are or how they are in order to be able to participate. Now, when developmental concerns are present, you can seek the appropriate evaluation, and earlier understanding and support can improve functioning and reduce the stress for the child and their family. Now, we also want to recognize the effects of trauma, grief, and family stress. Now, trauma may follow abuse, violence, loss, serious medical events, disaster, war, displacement, bullying, or family instability. Signs of trauma can include regression. So if a child is, they are potty trained and they've been potty trained for some years, they're maybe 7 and they don't have any issues, and then all of a sudden they start having trouble wetting the bed. So regressing, backwards. Things like nightmare or aggressive behavior, fear or numbness, hypervigilance, social withdrawal, sometimes sexualized behavior or sudden changes in functioning, not being able to do things they used to be able to. So if a child discloses abuse, the first thing you want to do is stay calm. It definitely can be upsetting. No parent wants to hear that something like this has happened to their child. But if you react, then it can communicate like, maybe they've done something wrong or that you're upset with them. So you want to stay calm and you want to listen without interrogating them. Asking a lot of questions, especially, if you're in a heightened emotional state, that might come off as like you being aggressive towards them. So you want to listen without interrogating and use the child's own words. You don't want to promise secrecy because you might have to involve people who can protect the child. You don't want to confront the alleged perpetrator, especially if doing so can increase danger for the child. So be familiar with the reporting requirements, like where you live, and then you want to connect the child with like qualified medical or protective or mental health services. Now, trauma-informed parenting emphasizes safety, predictability, appropriate choice, and repair. The question becomes, what helps this child's body and mind feel safe enough to heal when they've been through some trauma? Now, not every painful experience is trauma, but grief and family transitions also deserve careful support. Children often grieve in waves. Yes, adults also too, but children can grieve in waves. They may play one moment and cry the next, or revisit a loss at each new developmental stage. Divorce, or relocation, illness, incarceration, financial stress, caregiver distress, and family conflict can all affect behavior and emotional health. You want to maintain routines when possible and give truthful, age-appropriate information. So, if a child is asking about something, some loss or some life transition, you want to give them as much information as appropriate for their developmental age. You don't need to go in certain details if you're talking to a 6-year-old versus a 16-year-old. You want to make room for questions and mixed feelings. A child can love someone and still be angry with them. They can have faith and still feel confused by loss. You don't want to make children messengers between adults, when there's in cases of, divorce or separation. You don't want to ask them to choose sides or expect them to carry adult emotional burdens. Your children should not become your therapist. You want to let them be a child and get support, but from the appropriate, source, not from the child. Caregiver treatment is also a child mental health care because, when as adults we're caring for children who have, some of these issues, it can be overwhelming. It can take a lot from us. And so that is also taking care of ourselves is a means of taking care of our children. When we address our own depression, our own trauma or conflict or feelings of overwhelm, we improve the emotional environment in which our children are living and developing. So helping ourselves helps them. Now, as children become adolescents, our parenting role gradually changes. So we're going to talk about adolescence, those teenage years, technology, and coping. So adolescence requires a gradual move from direct control toward coaching, collaboration, and increasing responsibility. We still maintain limits, but we also increase the young person's voice in decisions and problem solving. We want to stay curious about their friendships and their faith and their relationships and school pressure, asking about discrimination or body image and questions they might be afraid to bring home. When they talk to you, you want to ask them things like, what's this like for you? Or what do you wish I understood? Or what kind of support would feel helpful right now? Adolescents need privacy, but danger can't remain secret. So you want to explain to them monitoring and safety expectations openly instead of relying on only on hidden surveillance. So hidden surveillance might be a part of the plan, but you want to talk to them about the fact that you will be monitoring things. Um, Connection will not eliminate conflict, so because you have, inshallah, a good enough relationship for them to talk to you, and tell you things, and you to be able to talk to them, it doesn't mean that there won't be any conflict. You're going to hear things you don't like, but trying to have that healthy relationship with them will help you to be able to keep them safe, even if they're not always happy with you. It creates a pathway back after conflict, and it makes it more likely that they will talk to you about what's really happening. Like, if they know that, yes, they might get upset, but it's going to be okay. Like, they're not going to, abandon me, or they're going to be reasonable, then they will. They might be upset for some time, but they'll come back. That relationship, that pathway stays open. Now, technology can either support that connection or amplify distress. Technology can offer learning, creativity, friendship, and support, but it can also expose young people to comparison, bullying, sexual content, exploitation, sleep loss. This is something that I see so much, kids staying up all night on their phones or their devices, and sleep is such an important part of development and being able to function, especially in these teenage years. But yeah, technology can affect sleep loss. It also causes compulsive use. Kids become addicted to these devices. Adults become addicted to the devices. But definitely it can lead to that. It can also lead to isolation. Even though, technology gives us more opportunities to communicate, sometimes it does the opposite of that. And then it can also expose them to content related to self-harm and substance abuse. When it comes to like compulsive use, the apps, that kids are using, especially social media apps, like they have people, with psychology backgrounds who helped develop these apps who make them addicted. Like they want them to use them more. And so it's not an accident that they become addicted. It's designed that way. So creating a family technology agreement that addresses when and where devices are used, that addresses sleep protection, privacy, respectful communication, and what a child should do when unsafe content appears is important. You want to teach the skill of coming to an adult without assuming that disclosure, like telling the adult, will automatically lead to humiliation or permanent loss of the device. We want to model what we expect. So if we're saying that we expect you to be at the dinner table and not have your device, we can't then have our device at the dinner table using it. We have to model that behavior. It's really difficult to teach them about having presence when every adult in the room is looking at a phone. A sudden change in online behavior might also be a clue that bullying is happening, or that there's some relationship stress, like with their friends, that there may be exploitation happening because there are predators who, look for people who are vulnerable. It may also be an indication of anxiety or depression. When it comes to like modeling, I think about it as, like when I think about driving, we don't just give a kid a set of keys and say, go out there, drive. They have to get a permit first. They have to practice so many hours, to learn how to drive. They have to take tests, so we have to have a plan or a system for teaching them how to use these things, because there's a lot of opportunity for them to be harmed, for them to be preyed upon. So we want to try and do that as safe as possible. So we want to ask whether like gaming or scrolling has become the child's main way to escape anxiety or sadness, conflict, loneliness, or low self-esteem. Is it interfering with their sleep or with their school or with their prayer, with their even just like being physically active, their family life, being included in family life or in their personal relationships or friendships. Sometimes removing a device might be necessary for safety, but removing it without addressing the need underneath can intensify distress or drive the behavior into secrecy. I cannot tell you, I mean, sometimes, removing devices, you will see some reactions from kids that, the quietest, most meek, mild, child who's like picking up a television and throwing it, or, just seriously, like they sometimes just lose it. Like this, their phones are so important to them. It's their lifeline, and you take that away from them, they feel like the world is ending, So it's if it's something that is done, you want to make sure they understand why, and then like work on what the issue is that caused them to lose access to that. Now, we want to pair the limits that we set around technology with alternatives. So if they lose access because of some inappropriate behavior, or because of isolation, then you want to offer them ways to connect. It's not just about like taking it away, but actually addressing the behavior that is involved in why it's being taken away. It might be something like counseling. It might be like doing things that are physically active. We're going to go to the park, or we're going to, do something active together. Might be doing creative activities together. Just working on having like healthy friendships instead of, some of these unhealthy ones they have online. But also having meaningful roles in the family and the community to give them something else to focus on, give them a way to feel like they belong, to something. Young people need offline belonging, not only to reduce screen time, but to help with their, whole person development. Now, substance use may serve a similar coping function and requires calm seriousness. Some young people might use alcohol, marijuana, vaping products, which are extremely easy for them to access, sometimes pills or inhalants, or other substances, to fit in. Like they might use them to try to fit in with others, to help them sleep or numb emotional pain that they're dealing with. These things might help reduce anxiety or help them to manage trauma or escape conflict. So substance use can worsen mood or psychosis or impulsivity or school problems that they're having, accidents, or increase their suicide risk. And shame around this increases secrecy. If we can have calm seriousness, it allows us to gather the information we need for their safety. We want to ask what is being used and how often, with whom, like why, like how does it help them, and what consequences have occurred. We want to ask about driving, like if they're of that age, and mixing substances, looking at their overdose risk and whether the child, if they've tried to stop, like what happens if they're experiencing withdrawal. We don't want to rely on punishments in lectures or drug testing. That's one of the things I think people, I'm going to get this drug test and make them take the drug test at home. And so now I've proved to you that you are doing this thing and made them feel bad. And now what? Like, what do we do? What happens next? So it's something that we don't want to rely on something like that. If it's at a level, where it's needed, you might need to arrange an appointment with a qualified medical or behavioral health person for an assessment. But you also want to address, who are their peers that they're around, because that has an impact on what they're doing, and that's something that we always want to be, mindful of, is like, who are their friends? Who are they spending their time with? Who has influence over them? And that influence doesn't just have to be in person. It can be online. We also want to think about what's happening in the family. Families are complex, and sometimes the reasons why they're doing this are because of issues that are at home, or conflict, or just not having healthy relationships. But we want to look at those things, and also if there's trauma involved. Sometimes, if we are trying to force them to stop using, it can actually be a medically dangerous situation. So we have to be careful about like how we approach detox if that's something that's needed, and if it's something that requires like, professional care. So here's a practical way to begin the conversation around substance use. First, most importantly, I think you want to choose a calm time. You know, like if this is something that's going on, there's going to be heightened emotions. So you don't want to try and go in and have a conversation that can be effective when it's chaotic. So you want to choose a calm time and state observations rather than accusations, you know. So what you've noticed. I found some vaping, I found some vapes, and I've noticed changes in your sleep. And, you know, you seem more irritable. I've noticed changes in your mood. I'm concerned about your health. I want to understand what's happening, and we're going to get help. Like, but doing this in a calm way. If it's, you know, yelling at them, why would you do this? I found this. You must be, you know, you must be smoking, and I don't know what. We never taught you to do anything like that. You know, kind of that approach isn't helpful. It might help them hide it better from you. It might help them, you know, help them feel even worse, because a lot of times they don't necessarily feel good about this. Like it's a tool that they're using for some other reason, and they don't necessarily want to be doing it. And so, you know, we come along and then make them feel worse about it. So, but starting in that way, it might be more effective. We want to ask what the substance does for them. So understanding that can help us to understand, like, how do we replace that? So if it helps me to sleep at night. Okay, so we need to figure out like what's getting in the way of sleeping, and how do we work on improving that so you can get to sleep. Or it helps me feel calm so that I can talk to my friends. Oh, so you might be experiencing like some social anxiety. What are some tools that we can do, or what are some other ways we can try and address that? But yeah, asking what does it do for them, and then you want to set clear safety boundaries around driving or access to money, or them using substances in the home, and also safety of other like younger siblings. You don't want to humiliate them publicly or recruit untrained people to investigate them. Let me call all the family members to say, can you believe that he did XYZ, to like help, you know, make them feel even worse about this. So that's not the approach you want to take. And then while we're addressing this, you know, and they're going through recovery, we have to understand that it might include setbacks. So there will be accountability that's necessary, but we also have to have hope. You know, if we don't really believe that they can do it, even if we don't say it, they can feel that, they know that. And so we have to have hope that they can, so that they can have hope that they can get better. Now, self-harm requires an equally calm response and direct safety questions. So self-harm might signal overwhelming emotional pain and an attempt to regulate distress. So self-harm meaning like they might do something to harm themselves, like physically harm themselves, but without the intention of like trying to end their life or commit suicide. So cutting themselves or burning themselves, things like that. It shouldn't be dismissed as manipulation or attention seeking. Even if the intent isn't suicide, the risk can change, and injuries might require medical attention, and the child might need some qualified care. But the number one thing that we can do first is to stay calm. If we look shocked or angry, or we have a response that like makes them feel ashamed, then they may never come back and talk to you about it ever again. We want to ask about their injuries and medical needs, and ask them directly if they've had thoughts about suicide. We don't want to like demand that they show you the injury in a way that humiliates them. You want to discuss methods in detail. I'm sorry, we don't want to discuss methods in detail or rely on a promise that they will simply stop. You want to work with people who have expertise in safety planning and treatment, and with the family's response. The goal is to reduce danger and understand what the behavior is doing for them. So similar to like the substances, like what does this do for you? How does it help you? So that you can try and build safer ways for them to address that need. Now, when a child says they don't want to live, we have to take that statement seriously. If they tell you, I don't want to live, you want to believe that that distress is serious and ask clearly, are you thinking about suicide? And then ask them, have you thought about how or when? Do you have access to what you would use? And are you able to stay safe while we get help? Direct questions about suicide don't plant the idea of it in their brains. When you ask direct questions, it communicates that they can speak to you truthfully and that you as the adult are prepared to help them. You don't want to say things like, you would never do that, or, think about your family, or a Muslim would not say something like this. Those responses might make them feel more ashamed and then cause them to deny what they're feeling, and then you don't know that this is something that they're struggling with. You don't want to promise secrecy, and I should say this, you can promise that you're not going to go talk to people who don't need to know, but if you're going to talk about it, it's because of safety. It's going to be because you're trying to get them help that they need to be safe. So you might say something like, I love you too much to handle this alone. We're going to get help now. If the danger is immediate, you don't want to leave the child alone. You might have to call 911 for a life-threatening emergency, like if they have already done something to attempt suicide and they need help. That may be the step that you need to do. In the United States, you can also call or text 988 for crisis support. And then you can also arrange urgent professional evaluation. And then you want to secure things in the home that they might use. So if there are firearms or medications or other things that they can use, then you want to make sure they don't have access to those things. Now, we're going to apply that response to a brief case. So imagine your teenager says, I can't do this anymore. I've been vaping and cutting because it's the only thing that calms me down. Now, the first response is not punishment or confiscation or a lecture about faith. The first response is calm, connection, and safety. So a helpful first sentence might be, I'm really glad you told me. I'm sorry you've been carrying this much pain. I need to ask some direct questions so I can help keep you safe. Then ask about suicide or injuries, if they have a plan, timing or access, if there's been any substance use, and their ability to remain safe. Now, if risk is present, you want to maintain supervision and activate crisis or clinical help. You want to reduce access to danger when it's safe to do so. And then after immediate safety is addressed, the treatment plan can examine, what's behind this depression, anxiety, trauma, substance use, school stress, or family dynamics, the connection to the community. Safety first doesn't remove, Islam. It creates the conditions in which clinical care and spiritual care can work together. Now we move from crisis response to protective conditions children need every day. So protective factors at home include warm and reliable relationships, clear routines and limits, healthy coping, problem-solving skills, a positive identity, purpose and faith, access to care, and reduced access to lethal means, and then hope for the future. Hope is so powerful. Those factors don't guarantee that your child will never struggle. We can try and do everything perfectly, and still there may be some issues, there may be struggle. But having these things can make your child more likely to talk to you or tell you about things that's going on. These things can help reduce barriers that can get in the way of you understanding what's going on, and then help improve the possibility of recovery. Children need at least one adult who notices what's going on, can notice when changes happen, who listens to them, and who stays, like doesn't, they can depend on them. A protective home isn't one that doesn't have conflict, but it's a home where conflict can be repaired and where emotions can be named and where safety concerns are taken seriously. And a home where seeking help or asking for help is treated like wisdom instead of with shame. So coming and asking for help isn't something that they should be afraid to do, that they can feel comfortable doing. Now, protection also extends beyond the household. Children also need welcoming schools, masajid, youth groups, extended families, mentors, and healthy peer relationships. Who are their friends? Who are they spending their time with? Our community spaces should include children who are also neurodivergent. So those kids who have ADHD or those kids who have autism. I have seen, some places where they might have a sign that says like no children under a certain age, which just makes me so sad because we want our children to love, coming to the masjid. So we want to make these places inclusive. No, community is not a substitute for treatment, but belonging can reduce isolation and make help easier to access. Parents shouldn't have to navigate these things alone, so this can be a resource for parents and allow us to build relationships with counselors and teachers and imams and coaches who are already a part of our community. Being able to establish those relationships before a crisis occurs increases like the resource that we have to access. Some of the things we want to ask is which children are welcomed only when they're quiet and easy. Who has stopped attending? Like who stopped coming? Who sits alone? Are there kids who you see a bunch of them in a group and there's one just in the corner by themselves? Who is frequently corrected? We have the brothers and sisters at the masjid who are very well-meaning, but who's the one who's like always constantly being told, no, stop, don't, and I'm not saying just let them do whatever, but there's different ways to address that. If there's a child who is doing something that's disruptive, like what's an alternative for them to do instead of that thing? Are we providing that? And how are we building an emotionally safe community that notices absence and follows up with mercy? So not yelling and screaming at the kid, but actually like trying to find something you notice, like, wow, I wish I had that much energy, like, can you show me how to do whatever, but having some way of addressing it with mercy and not, with correction all the time. So there's a simple 4-part framework that can help us remember our role. So we want to see, noticing the change, hear, value, and connect. So see means noticing the changes in behavior or mood or relationships or functioning. Hear means listening before reacting and asking what's happening beneath the behavior. Value means protecting the child's dignity and belonging, even when we're setting limits. And connect means bring in the right support rather than trying to carry every concern alone. So this framework applies to everyday emotion or discipline, anxiety or depression, or those neurodevelopmental differences. It also applies to like substance use and self-harm in crisis. Connection is not giving in. It preserves the relationship needed for us to be able to guide, to be able to hold them accountable, and to keep them safe. So before we close, I want everyone to try to identify like one practical step that they can do. So what's one conversation you need to begin in your family, or what resource do you need to identify before a crisis happens? What routine could you set to help strengthen connection in your family or with your children? And who is one child or parent who might be isolated and in need of support? and then choose one small action rather than leaving only with like good intentions. Inshallah, this is helpful, but like what's an actual step that we can take um, in order to address that? It might be like a weekly one-on-one check-in with your child, or a family technology agreement, an appointment with a clinician, or a conversation with a teacher, safety concerns, securing medications, or things that might increase risk for harm. And then just learning about like what are the local resources in your community. I don't know, we're at time, right? Okay. So inshallah, I want to close with hope and not pressure. Our children don't need perfect parents. They need adults who listen, who notice and listen, repair and protect, and seek help. So every time we respond to a difficult truth with calmness instead of shame, we make future honesty possible. Every time we reconnect after conflict, we strengthen that pathway home. So a child who knows they can return to us with the truth is safer than a child who believes they have to struggle alone. So Allah grant us wisdom in our words, calmness in our responses, and mercy in our homes. Protect our children in their bodies, minds, hearts, relationships, and faith, and help us recognize suffering, seek appropriate help, repair when what has been harmed is harmed, and create families and communities of safety, guidance, belonging, and hope. Amen.
Ameen. Takbir. Allahu Akbar.
Questions?
Sure.
We have time for questions. Does anybody have questions?
You hoping anybody raise their hand? We got over tonight.
No, it's fine. We have time.
Assalamu alaikum. So, for those of us who are maybe school counselors or school teachers, we see all different types of students and they come in with whatever they're carrying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, I've seen a student maybe express a lot of aggression, and I wonder what might they be carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have advice for ways to build trust with students, or maybe it's showing that they need support in ways that don't specifically say I need support, but
Right.
you can tell.
Right. So, in terms of like building connection, like that's the first thing is I try to do is work on building connection. And that can be, it might be something as simple as like, asking them about kind of, what kind of things they like to do, or, connecting over, like, oh, I like your tennis shoes or whatever, finding some way to like connect with them. But then also asking them about like their, like day-to-day life. So maybe asking, about like, if they're having any trouble with getting work done, at school. Are they having, like, if they say something like, oh, they're tired, like, oh, are you having trouble sleeping? Yeah, what's getting in the way of sleeping? I'm just like constantly thinking about things and I can't, turn my mind off. But like looking for those things that affect their everyday life. And then sometimes that stuff just comes out, like when they start, talking. And then I think a big part of it is just being a calm, regular presence, if you can. So someone that they can see, like, okay, I talk about this thing, they don't react, or they don't treat me like, what's wrong with you, or, that kind of thing. So building the connection in terms of just being consistent, in their life. So, I hope that's helpful.
Assalamu alaikum. So when you first started your sessions from Saturday to now, we were kind of in more of the adult.
Yes.
So now we went to kids. However, ADHD and all the different things and the autism, they do grow up and be adults.
They do.
And in our case, especially, I'm wondering when these people come to your masjid, or we may have some that act a little twitchy or whatever, we could say, we thinking one thing, but now we're understanding if it could be one of those. how would you come about to say, hey, are you, because the autism thing is a new one, the spectrum, what have, that's kind of new to, to this, but how would we ask them, so that we'll know why you do certain things, so we won't have to feel like, the elevator don't go all the way to the top or whatever, that's our thought concept, right?
Yes.
But we don't wanna, so we end up treating
Right,
them like that, I'm just being real.
Absolutely, I
And we
understand.
keep our distance and
Right.
all that. How do we come about to ask them
So
what is it?
I think this is where trying to build like inclusive spaces or welcoming spaces comes in, because we may not need to ask the question. It may just be noticing certain things, unless there's like, disruption, that's or safety or something like that. But it may be a matter of like noticing, and that, okay, we have a lecture or something like that. And for some people, it is just really hard for them to sit still. So making a space, where they can just get up and walk around, or making them feel comfortable doing things like that. Or looking for people's strengths and then giving them the opportunity to be able to use those strengths. So, maybe it's somebody who does have ADHD and they're like very creative when it comes to, a certain thing, execution of plans, but they're not that great at trying to like create the plan. So, giving them opportunities to work within their strengths and not necessarily trying to force them to do something that doesn't come naturally. So it may not be a matter of us like trying to get a label or, ask them like that, but seeing like what is like what's going on, and then trying to address it from that aspect. Now, unless again, like there's some kind of like safety issue, or if it does seem to cause distress, you can always, pull somebody aside and in a, depending on the kind of relationship you have with them, have a conversation about like, hey, is everything okay? Or I noticed this, is there something that I can do to help? Or is there something that you need in trying to address it in that way? And we did switch, and I think we were gonna maybe finish up the adults if we have time, but yeah, that was part of that. Yes, yes, sir.
So we're lining up an autism awareness lecture next month, probably the weekend of the 28th of August. So part of it is us educating our communities and bringing in experts to talk to us about these things. So, and like April is Autism Awareness Month. I have a son that's on the autism spectrum, and he's challenged with all the things that you get challenged with on the autism spectrum, and then the anxiety that's associated with it, the challenge on reading social cues and all those things that are associated with autism spectrum. And I was in denial. He's 20. He's 26 now. When the idea first was brought to me, I was like, ain't nothing wrong with it. So you go through a denial as a parent, right? And so it's a whole process of education that we have to go through collectively as a community. Historically, we have not been prepared to deal with people with mental illness. And thus, community members who may have mental illness, may have emotional health problems, have not had a place to go, have not been welcomed. And then when they have a crisis, we don't know how to manage it. It's only with time, education, sensitivity, mercy, can we get to that point. So just to know, we're lining up an autism expert, and we're going to do more and more of these kinds of things in the future.
There's an organization called Muhsin, MUHSEN, that they actually provide like programs and assistance for the Muslim communities to help make them more like conducive for people with disabilities. And so I think you can actually kind of get like a certification or something from them. It's M as in Mary, U H S E N as in Nancy, Muhsin.
.com or
.org.
Okay, I have one question too. Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned some parents, they only provide, place to live and discipline, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And
Food,
so-
shelter.
Shelter, yeah, shelter, food, and discipline. And so my question is, what advice do you have for parents who fall on that side? How do they deal with adult children who are maybe experiencing, any one of them above, right? How do they approach,
Yeah.
especially when that emotional connection is not
Like hasn't been,
established,
yes.
really,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's never too late. Honestly, like I feel like, people can feel like when there's change. And when I say that, like, oh, they just provide, food, shelter. I'm not like saying that like in a way that's putting it down. For some, that the way people like their experience influences what they're able to do or how they do things. So, previous generations, like that was doing those things was a lot. You know what I mean? It's still a lot, but like that was like really working hard to do that, and not everybody had that. Even still, true to this day. But so taking the good from that, and trying to move it forward. But I think one, education, because if you don't know how to do it, like how are you going to do it? You have to learn. So trying to get the help that they need to be able to learn those skills and to be able to work on that. And then I think you just try, and that might be with some assistance, that might be facilitated, it might be going to family therapy or that kind of thing. But I think sometimes what we can do is just try. I also think that dua is like one of the most powerful tools that we have, at hand, and asking Allah, to help us, trying to set our intention. I think Imam Wazir mentioned earlier, like to pray for sincerity, so that inshallah like, Allah can make that. And then also knowing and understanding that we don't have control. And so we can want this thing, we can try, but it might not happen, and that's, it just may be the qadr of Allah.
You mentioned education. Do you have any resources? I mean, we can share, like, if you don't have to, any resources for people
Yes.
that
Actually, yeah, somebody asked me earlier about like books. I'll put together like a list of resources, but I also think just things like this, having community programs where you bring people in to provide education and people can ask questions and that kind of thing. But I'll put together a resource list.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Al-Qur'an. This was an excellent presentation. Thank you for doing the work, because it's definitely needed within our community. We're going to be ending this session for today, unless anybody else has any questions.
We're not done yet. Join us at 6 o'clock at Shania Banquet Hall so we can raise the rest of the month. Well, we need to raise, to do the community center at the top of luxury, we need to raise some more money. I believe we can get the community center up and functioning with what we have currently in the bank. But we do want to raise enough that we're not just at the bare basic minimum. We are prepared to exist at the bare basic minimum. So, but it would be nice if we can raise another 150 to 200,000. I know at one time that would just scare us all as a community. But when we rebuilt the Masjid, I think we raised around $350,000 when we rebuilt the Masjid. We've raised enough now to get the community center up this time. Both of our remodels of Mercy, we probably raised, one time I know we raised $100,000 for one remodel, and almost $200,000 for another. So those numbers don't scare us anymore as a community. So alhamdulillah, I mean, come out tonight to the fundraiser. We actually have to start heading over there to get set up for those who are on the volunteer staff, so that we can get our tables set up and everything. So we're gonna pray and make a judicious move to get to the program. We have to get our guests back, those who are going to the airport and things like that. So we have a lot of moving parts. Do not let money not allow you not to make it. Just come. Okay? If there's enough people who can sponsor seats, especially the pioneers. I was with Masjid WD Mohammed, and someone asked him, and I'll share more with the community in my personal relationship with Masjid Mohammed. Some people use that to bring attention to themselves. And so they'll I was with these men, I've tried not to do that. But I had some special moments with Masjid WD Mohammed that I think it's important for me to share with the community. But I was with him, and it was Imam Vernon Fareed was alive. May Allah forgive both of them their sins and bless them with paradise. Imam Vernon said, asked Imam Muhammad, well, we want to do fundraisers, big fundraisers, and there are a number of people in the city that can afford to come. So what do we do, Imam? Because we don't want to make it difficult for the common person. And from his response that we got, we went ahead and we had our first $100 banquet per table. A lot of the less financially able community members didn't even try to come. But what we did was we had people sponsor tables, and we gave tickets to all the pioneers to make sure that they came. Right? So that way we saw both. I'm just sharing these strategies with you, right? And that's how we were able to have those big $100 plate banquets and still give all the pioneers dinners, because there's certain people who want to donate and they know they're not coming. So you sell them a table, and that table has 10 tickets. So you collect the $500 and $1,000 from them. Then they're telling you, man, I'm not going to be there. So then you take those 10 tickets and you give them to the pioneers for free, so that the pioneers can be part of it. And the fact that they don't have a lot of resources doesn't cut them out. So to that end, do not let tonight cut you out. I think for the first time, have you ever done nasheed in public? You have a world exclusive in Houston, Texas. The first time ever, Wali Ali will do nasheed. Allahu Akbar. Takbir! You'll be the first to witness it. The first one on record. Because the group that were raising money for the night, they kind of a little iffy about instruments. Yeah. So to meet them halfway, we said, let's just make it a nasheed. So they're coming, they want nasheed, so we're going to see his vocals tonight. We're going to let them blow, inshallah, tonight. And we've already put the request. We want all the Muslim songs that you always. We want Rasta Man, we want Holy Qur'an, we want We Cannot Stop Now. We want all your holy Muslim songs, brother. That's what we want tonight, inshallah. See you, we're going to pray Dhuhr, then we're going to head over to Mercy. Take your time, it does start till 6. But we'll see you this evening. Thank you all for coming this weekend. Imam Omar, would you like to say something?
No, just greetings.
This is Imam Omar.
Yeah, just greetings.
This is Imam Omar, mashallah. He supports us better from San Antonio than most people do from Houston.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Just want to bring you greetings on behalf of Imam Dr. Bashir Ali, the convener of conveners, and all the conveners throughout the nation. We have 6 conveners, or a total of 7. So we bring you greetings. This is our second home. We always feel good. I'm happy to support. Congratulations again to Houston, and thank you so much.
Takbir! So, where's Sheikh? Sheikh Emeritus, Imam Taleem. Will you call the event for us? No. I haven't heard you call the event. Yeah. So I'm going to ask Wali Ali to call the event, inshallah.